Guys, welcome to Previsualization, Prototyping Trailers in 3D. This talk is intended for anyone who wants to make their own 3D trailers. As indies, we often don't have AAA. We don't have AAA budgets that top studios have, but we can still, if we work smartly and effectively, we can still be very creative and come up with some great trailers that will really tell the story of our game. Today's topics are, we're going to start off talking about previs, 3D storyboarding and creativity. Then we're going to explore indie trailers versus high-end trailers. We're going to examine the traditional studio method versus the indie method. I'm going to talk about my process. Then we'll look at some additional bonuses from this method and end off with final thoughts and a quick Q&A. Now, this talk is about the creative process and not a technical talk. By this, I mean, I'm not going to be delving too much deep into the technical aspects of how to use Maya to create 3D films. Rather, this is more about how to work effectively and reiterate creatively and just get the most out of it so that you can come up with, creating something awesome. Generally speaking, you do need some 3D skills to work this way, but if you're not a 3D artist, you can always just sit next to somebody who is and just work with them. It's a very quick and easy process. And also, there are some clips that I'm showing today which I do not own the copyright to, so I'll only be showing a short snippets of those, and I'll post the links in the Discord channel for you to look at afterwards. All right, just a quick intro about me. My name's Daniel. I'm a professional 3D artist, games developer, and filmmaker from Sydney, Australia. I have a Master's of Animation from UTS. I'm an AFTRS directing graduate, and as mentioned, I've also done professional stunts training at the Australian Stunt Academy. My games label is Cohn Games, and my credits include feature films and TV shows such as Game of Thrones, Mad Max Fury Road, Peter Rabbit 1 and 2, Lego Ninjago, Lego Batman, Thor, Transformers Prime, as well as various game trailers and a bunch of other things. So let's start off talking about previs and creativity. For those of you who are not familiar with the term, previs is short for previsualization, which is a tool that filmmakers use to visualize and craft their story. So you really refine things. It's kind of like prototyping for filmmakers. So you kind of work on something, you get it looking as good as you can, where you make sure the story is coming across, and then that gets handed over to full production. There are lots of different ways you can do this. You can, there are a bunch of different techniques. It's whatever kind of works for you. So let's look at some previous examples. Over here at the top left, we have classic 2D storyboards, where a storyboard artist will draw everything else on panels, kind of like a comic strip. That you might add descriptions and arrows for camera descriptions or action descriptions. Generally speaking, it is quite a static method of visualizing. If we look below that over here on the Game of Thrones thing, the Game of Thrones image. This is more what we're going to be talking about later on today. So a company like the Third Floor will do 3D pre-visualization. So they take those original 2D storyboards and then they create mock-up 3D versions of those. Then they put everything on the timeline and they start to play with the timing, so you get a sense of motion and you really just get a sense of how the story works. You refine that and you get all the camera moves and everything working, and then that gets handed off to full production. Over here on the bottom right, we have more technical previs, and this is great for when you're doing live action, where you're building a set, so you know where your set pieces go, like what you need, what's going to be seen in camera, what's not, so where to put the detail. You also get to see where your cameras are going to be, where your tracks are going to be, and then you can place your crew and all sorts of things like that. And I also want to talk about previs for stunts and for fight choreography. So the way fight choreography works is the fight choreographer will choreograph a fight to look really good. First of all, you obviously need to get the action right, but you also want to make sure that things look good to camera. So it's always in their best interest to know where the camera is going to be and to try to, choreograph fights for camera. There's an image, unfortunately, I couldn't find, but it's a brilliant image if you can find it, by Gareth Evans and his amazing team from the Raids movies, when they're prevising a fight and have this awesome flying kick. And the way they did that is, they just basically took a camera and prevised all the different moves. And then for this one flying kick, a guy sat in a shopping cart and kicked out, and someone pushed him across in front of camera. Now, it looks absolutely ridiculous by itself, but when cut in context in the edits, you really start to feel that kick in the whole fight. And of course, when you look at the final thing, that kick is just brilliant. And also, as far as stunts go, and this is more on the technical aspect of it, stunts stunt guys will often go to the set where they're going to be performing the stunts, and then they'll go to their stunt studios and create mock-ups of those environments so they can practice all the stunts safely. Now, these are all other tools you can use. You can use stop motion, puppets, you can use Lego figures, whatever gets your fancy. But at the end of the day, none of these tools all these tools serve the creative vision, and none of them are ever going to be a replacement for the first and most important tool, the vision. Before you start doing anything, especially when it comes to 3D software, you want to first have some kind of vision of what you're trying to achieve and what you're trying to create. It doesn't need to be super exact or anything, but you don't want to start ever touching any tools before you kind of know what you want to do. So let's look at indie trailers versus high-end trailers. If you see these two panels on the right over here, these are from two amazing high-end trailers by DigicPix and Blizzard. These are companies that can produce feature film work, and they're amazing. Their work is amazing, but don't forget they have huge teams and huge time budgets, and these are pretty expensive. If I'm not mistaken, the Warhammer Mark of Chaos video went for, I think it's like 45 seconds long, and they went for upwards of $1 million. If you have rich parents who can supply that, power to you, use them. But for most of us, we have to come up with other solutions. Area where indies do not fall short of the AAA studios is that we are just as creative as them, and we can tell amazing stories in the same capacity. So let's look at some of the more typical approaches indies might use. So first of all, you have the more kind of wacky things where you just go to guerrilla style, doing something totally different. The team up here on the top left from Muddle Dash had this awesome trailer when they walk around town in these funny suits and they just film themselves running around. So you see them running around in supermarkets and on the streets. It's very entertaining to watch. It sells the sound of the game, and it's very cute. A more typical approach is what you see over here. Sorry, I forgot the name of this game. Basically, a lot of people, you'll get gameplay footage and you'll just cut it to music. Now that's fine. That sells the game. You definitely know what the game is going to be like. Personally, I feel that it lacks that extra immersive experience that you get from a good trailer. Also, another common method is when you take simple 2D concept art and you add very basic motion on it. So if we look at this panel down here from the game Shadowcade that was re-released several years ago, they start off with some concept art, and then you have some basic motion. So the Grim Reaper rises slowly in frame. I think there might be some drifting motion on his chain over here. There's some 2D bats in the background. There's a bit of a camera drift. It's simple stuff. It is quite static, but it definitely tells your story. So I want to talk about 3D trailers for indies and how you can take simple game assets and actually create quite an impressive trailer. And I'd like to show you the trailer that I made for my most recent game, Speed Builder. Cool. So before we start talking about that, let's examine how these kinds of movies are made. So if we look at the traditional studio method, as like everything, it'll start off with an idea. So once you have the idea, then the studio will go and they will hire a 2D storyboard artist who will draw everything in storyboard panels. Those panels are then taken and put on the timeline to get a sense of the pacing of the story, and that becomes a 2D animatic. Once we have a 2D animatic, we will go into the world of 3D, into layout over here. Different words: layout, previs, 3D blocking, 3D scouting. It's all the same thing. So you're basically trying to recreate those same frames in 2D and 3D, and then you start adding some basic motion to things, and just to get a sense of how everything works together. Once that starts to kind of work, that gets fleshed out more, and eventually that gets handed over to animation over here, where the animators do an animation pass, and then it goes into lighting and rendering over here. So just a quick word on storyboards. Storyboards come in all shapes and sizes, and is usually the first step. Believe it or not, both these storyboards are from Steven Spielberg movies over here. This one on the left is his own hands for the movie Poltergeist, and this one over here is a 2D storyboard artist's work for Jurassic Park. Now, obviously, the more detailed you can make it, the better. And you still get a sense of what's happening. This one over here, but I'm sure Steven Spielberg knew what was happening over here. Not everybody would really be able to vision the story over here. This one over here, the more professional one, you can get a sense of the story very nicely, but it does take quite an amount of time to draw this. Regardless of how you work, after this, you create the storyboard animatic, where everything gets put to time to get a sense of how everything comes together. So very simple storyboard images over here. You're just selling the general action and the motion. Like you're getting a sense of what's happening, and like you start to feel the story come together. I'm just going to cut this short now, but feel free to look at the entire thing in the links, which I'll put on Discord. All right, so after we finish our storyboard animatic, we then go into the world of 3D, where we start to scout the scene and start to create those shots. So by 3D scouting, I mean you go into the 3D environments, you place your characters, you pose them in front of the camera, and you start to recreate those same storyboard shots. And then in a similar way, afterwards you create a storyboard animatic where you add basic motion onto everything. Once you're happy with that, you flesh everything out into Previs. So let's just look at what some of that might look like. So very basic motion over here. There's not much happening in the camera. It's no camera moves or anything. It's really just kind of to establish that scene in 3D and make sure it still works. Feel free to watch the rest of this after the talk. And then from then on, that goes into Previs, where we start to add some motion and to visualize it further. So we're having some camera moves over here. I'm just going to start ahead a bit. We're getting some awesome camera motion. We're really kind of starting to feel this environment. Here we have some action shots. And if we go over here, we start again to get more of a sense of the motion and the animation. It's still pretty rough, but you start to really get a sense of the story. Now, I'd like to talk about my indie method. So I like to storyboard everything in 3D because I just find it gives me the most flexibility and the best creative results. Now, there are several advantages of working this way. So first of all, if your game is in 3D, you already have game production-ready assets. So you can just open your 3D package, throw them in there, and you can already start working very quickly. Now, 2D storyboards are great, but first of all, you might not have access to a storyboard artist, or might not be much of a drawer yourself. And also, one of the biggest issues with 2D storyboards is that very often the scale of the things you see in the board don't match your 3D assets. So an example of this that we had was on the Peter Rabbit movies, where the storyboard artist drew panels with human beings and rabbits together. And then when we went into 3D and recreated those, the scale of the rabbits was often off, and usually was too small compared to the humans. So we had to come up with all sorts of creative solutions to that. Now that is quite a time-consuming process, which is quite hard to match from shot to shot. And when you storyboard in 3D, providing that your assets are the right scale to begin with, you never have those kind of issues. Now once you get comfortable working this way, you can really work quickly. You can test things. You can work creatively. You can reiterate and really just get a sense of how everything works together. So it's a great way to explore creativity. And of course, if at the end of this you find that your game assets aren't high quality enough, providing that you work correctly with things like the Maya reference editor, you can always just upraise them and put in higher end assets. So let's look at what my 3D storyboard animatic looked like. So individual panels, just like a normal 2D one. And this is all created in 3D, and immediately you're getting a sense of what's happening. So after that, once I've got something that I was happy with, I took that into Previs, and I started doing some animation on top of that. Sorry, there we go. So the next step is to add basic motion to things. All this animation, by the way, is all in-game game stuff. These are run cycles from the game, so really it doesn't take a lot of time at all to come up with something like that. That's a stand-in fire solution. Some of the animation at this stage is obviously going to be very rough, which is totally fine. Like you really just want to test things out and really get a sense of how everything's working. Like that is in a final motion, for instance. I don't think this camera was final. There were some differences, but it's really just to kind of get a sense of how everything comes together. All right, so let's talk about my process. So, like everything, I started with some kind of vision. So with speed builds, I kind of had an idea of what I wanted in my head, and then the next thing was I started just writing down basic key ideas. So things like start on logo, crane down to village, have villagers run past camera, chased by fire. Profile shot of villagers running, then quickly pan to fire. Crash zoom on villager's face as he sees cliff. So just some kind of idea like that, where you start to know where you're going and what you want to do. The next step is I got into my 3D package, in my case Maya, and I imported all my 3D assets from all my game assets, and I started setting up my scene and setting up my shots. I created my shots, got to something that I was happy with, and then started adding some animation to kind of flesh things out. And then I keep on fleshing that out until I have something I'm very happy with, and then that goes into final production. And one of the most important and overlooked steps is the feedback loop. I find it very beneficial to show my work to people at various stages of production. So these could be friends, family, colleagues. Ideally, closer to your target audience is always better, but even the most uneducated eyes can give you very valid feedback. I like showing people fresh. I like showing fresh people every single time. So these are always people who are seeing it for the first time, because let's face it, that's what your audience is going to be like. And also, if possible, if you can be in the room with them when you show to them, so you can look at their face, that's very, very helpful. It's very similar to when you're playtesting games and you let other people playtest your games and you just gauge their reaction. So although they can tell you a lot of things afterwards, you also note all the small different nuances. You'll see when they get the punchlines, the jokes, like the gags. You just get all that extra info by doing it that way. So let's jump into Maya over here quickly. So this is my 3D scout scene. These are all my game assets imported into the scene. My scene setup is pretty basic. If you look through over here through the camera as I scrub through, and every frame is a simple storyboard panel. It's just really quick and dirty, and this is all throwaway stuff. These are all, as I said, game assets. So this is all terrain from the game. All the forest and the trees and everything are from the game. I did do some 3D work for the mountains over here, but that's super simple stuff to do. We have a stock standard 3D camera, like the village. Those are all game assets. That fires as a stand-in, the simple rig. Those characters these are all my game characters with the game rigs. So really, it's a minimum amount of time to set this up. One thing I can't show you due to the capture software is I like to use something called quick selection sets. And what that allows me to do is to select everything in bulk very easily. So I don't have to select things one by one. So in this scene, I have two over here. I have one for all the world controllers, so all my characters and my fire. I can select them all and just slide them across the scene easily. It's just a great way to move around. And then I have another one for all controllers. So that's every single controller that is animated, including the camera, gets selected. And once you work this way, you can easily shuffle keyframes around. You can iterate, you can test things out. It's a very easy, flexible way to work. So the big advantage with working like this is that once you set up a few shots, you can really test and iterate stuff and just come up with new ideas. So let's, for instance, look at this down shot over here of the bridge. Now, I personally think it works very nicely, but let's maybe see if we can come up with some other options. So if I maybe just grab the camera over here, just rotate it around. Let me just bring it down. Yep, maybe something like that. Yep, let's go for a profile shot. Make sure you set your keyframes to step so you still get that storyboard feel. So now they run, so it works this way as well. Great, let's maybe go for a wider lens, go to like a 22 and move the camera in. Yeah, we get this kind of comedic effect, kind of more of the bird's eye thing. Let's maybe go for something more dramatic. Let's maybe put the camera under the bridge. Let's just rotate that around, just nudge it around a bit. Yep, that works very nicely, and of course you get that fire falling in front of the camera, which is pretty cool as well. You can also test out camera moves this way. So I'm going to go to the last frame, crane the camera up. I'll select those keys and I'll spline them just so I get a bit of motion. And you kind of get a sense of how that camera now moves. So you have you can play with things that way. It's a really great way to test things out. Like in a matter of seconds, we had like 4 or 5 versions. And you can just, once again, work creatively and iterate endlessly until you have the best result possible. So once we finish with that, so we get something that we're happy with. We then go into the previous scene, so I'll take all those keyframes and I'll put them on the timeline and start to space them out and add some basic motion. So if you look through my camera over here, as I scrub through, you'll see that everything starts moving. Animation is basic at this point. As I said, these are all in-game cycles, so it's literally just sliding characters across with their run cycle. But you're starting to get a sense of how everything is working, and you can, it's still very rough, so you can easily iterate and test things out. So, and if something doesn't work, you can play with it, and you can really just spend the time to make sure it works as best you can. All right, let's talk about some additional bonuses. So one advantage you get when you're working in live action. So if you look at the top left panel over here, this is from a short film that I directed. So I previewed everything in 3D, and then I end up with all my camera positions. So I know where my cameras are going to be, I know what my lenses are, and I basically get my shoot plan for free. You can't, and this image doesn't have arrows, but like this over here as a camera moves, like you can know where your tracks are going to go. Just you get all this stuff for free. It's also great for green screens as well. You can plan where your lights are going to be and just what direction you're going to be shooting from. When you're doing 3D environments, it's very helpful when you storyboard in 3D, because you get camera coverage, so you know exactly what part of your environment is going to be in camera, and you know what to model up. If you just have 2D storyboards, then you're not going to know exactly what you're going to be seeing, and you might have to spend more time modeling up a bigger environment. You can also start testing out things like color boards and lighting or lighting changes, and you can even start having more of a feel with the audio. It's a much quicker way of kind of getting to that end result faster. All right, so some final thoughts. 3D storyboarding and previs is a very powerful tool for indies to come up and make the most interesting creative trailer that they can make. Especially with the current tools today, with the developments that we're seeing with like Unreal Engine's virtual camera, mocap is becoming, let's just say there are more affordable motion capture solutions, so you can really test things out quickly. And the whole virtual studio as well, if you have a bit more of a budget, really just opens up the possibilities. If any of you guys would like to chat about Previs further, please feel free to hit me up at danielconvfx@gmail.com. I'm also happy to offer my services to indies. I make my rates very indie friendly, so please feel free to reach out. Check out my showreels at danielcon.com.au and check out my games at congames.com. Thank you very much, guys. I hope you enjoyed the talk, and let's open it up for questions.
Thanks very much, Daniel. That was a really, really awesome talk. And so we might have a couple of questions coming through now. We've only got a minute or two. Some are typing here, but in the meantime, I got my start by editing trailers, making trailers. So I've got a couple of questions. Right. I might ask one while chat is waiting on it. Would you say it's worth cinematographers and directors to have some 3D knowledge and experience, even if it's just minimal?
Absolutely. I mean, like everything, the more you know about the stuff, the more you can do with it. Even if you don't operate with the software yourself, once you sit with someone who does operate 3D, if you know the terminology, you can just be more effective in how you communicate with them.
For sure. And do trailer animators find themselves that they sometimes need to wait until they get final character models and rigs animations from the team, or like it's a bit of a chicken and egg scenario? Have you experienced that before?
Yeah, usually what we do is we'll start off working with low-res assets or stand-in assets. So once again, if you set up your scene, fine, you can always just swap things out later. So it's totally fine even creating like the most blockiest assets you can use. You just start to construct, the scene and get a feel for how everything works, and then you swap them in later on. So for me personally, that hasn't been too much of a thing. Sometimes you might have to wait on a particular asset, but generally speaking, you find ways to make it work.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Daniel.
Thanks. Hope you guys enjoyed the talk, and I'll post the links to those things in the chat.